What happens when a man who has everything discovers he has nothing at all? When Mason Reed, one of America's youngest billionaires, walked into that frozen diner on Christmas Eve, he thought he was just escaping the emptiness of his mansion. He had no idea that a broke single mother counting pennies for her daughter's dinner would shatter every wall he'd built around his heart. This is the story of how one night changed 5 lives forever. A story about loss, second chances, and discovering that the family you choose can heal wounds you thought would never close. If you're watching from anywhere in the world, drop your city in the comments below. I want to see how far this story travels. And if it touches your heart, hit that like button and stick around until the end, because what happens next will remind you why kindness matters more than money ever could. Now, let me take you back to that freezing December night in Chicago, where everything began. The Golden Lantern Diner sat on the corner of Clark and Division like it had been there since the dawn of time, which wasn't far from the truth. 73 years of burnt coffee, linoleum floors worn smooth by shuffling feet, and the persistent smell of bacon grease that no amount of cleaning could ever fully erase. The neon sign outside flickered, had been flickering for at least 5 years, casting intermittent red light across the snow-buried street. Mason Reed pushed through the door at 9:47 p.m. on Christmas Eve, letting in a blast of Arctic air that made the 3 other customers, all regulars, all alone, look up with mild irritation before returning to their plates. He wasn't dressed like a billionaire. Dark jeans, worn leather jacket, a gray scarf his late wife had given him 4 Christmases ago. The cashmere was starting to pill at the edges. He kept meaning to replace it. He never did. "Sit anywhere, hun," called the waitress without looking up from the register. Doris had to be in her 60s, gray hair and a bun so tight it probably gave her headaches, but her smile was genuine when she finally glanced his way. "Coffee, please." Mason slid into a booth by the window, the vinyl cracking under his weight. Outside, snow fell in thick, lazy flakes that had already buried the parked cars up to their wheel wells. Chicago weather. Brutal and indifferent. His phone buzzed. He ignored it. It buzzed again. He turned it face down on the table. The coffee arrived in a mug that had seen better decades, a chip in the rim that Mason automatically rotated away from his mouth. Doris lingered. "You okay, sweetheart? You look like you could use more than coffee." "I'm fine." Mm-hmm. She didn't believe him, but she'd worked diners long enough to know when to push and when to leave well enough alone. "Holler if you need anything." Mason wrapped both hands around the mug, letting the heat seep into his fingers. Through the window, the city looked like a snow globe someone had shaken too hard. Peaceful, if you didn't think too much about all the people out there with nowhere warm to go. His son was at home with his mother-in-law, 7 years old and already learning to navigate the carefully maintained fiction that Daddy was fine, that everything was fine, that the big empty house was exactly where they were supposed to be on Christmas Eve, instead of... He cut that thought off. He'd gotten good at cutting thoughts off. The door chimed. Mason didn't look up, not at first, but there was something about the quality of the silence that followed, the way Doris stopped mid-step, the way the old man at the counter glanced over his shoulder, that made him turn his head. The woman who walked in looked like she'd been fighting a war and losing. Not old, maybe late 20s, but worn in a way that had nothing to do with age. Dark hair pulled back in a ponytail that had given up hours ago, strands falling around a face that might have been beautiful if it wasn't so goddamn exhausted. Her coat was too thin for Chicago winter, and there was duct tape holding one of her boots together. But it was the little girl clutching her hand that made Mason's chest tighten. 5, maybe 6 years old. Blonde curls escaping from under a pink knit hat with a broken pom-pom. The kind of kid who should have been in warm pajamas, waiting for Santa, not trudging through a blizzard at nearly 10 o'clock at night. "Sit down, baby," the woman said softly, steering the child toward a booth near the back. "We'll warm up for a minute." The girl's lips were faintly blue. Doris appeared with menus and that professionally cheerful expression that waitresses perfect over decades. "Evening, what can I get you ladies?" The woman, Mason couldn't hear her name, wasn't close enough, pulled off her gloves with careful, deliberate movements. Her hands were red and chapped. Could we see a menu, please?" "Course, hun. Coffee?" "No, thank you." She opened the menu, and Mason saw her eyes scan the prices with the kind of focus that spoke of mental mathematics, of budgets counted in quarters and dimes. The little girl leaned against her mother's arm, shivering. Mason should have looked away, should have minded his own business. He was good at that, had made an art of it, actually, over the past 3 years. The world was full of sad stories. You couldn't fix them all. You'd go crazy trying. He watched anyway. The woman's purse was one of those cheap canvas things that probably came from a dollar store. She opened it slowly, like she was afraid of what she'd find inside, and began pulling out change. Quarters, dimes, nickels, a few pennies. She counted them twice, her lips moving silently, then closed her eyes for just a second. "Mommy?" The little girl's voice was small. "Can I have the pancakes?" "Yes, baby." "What about you?" "I ate earlier, remember? At Aunt Marie's." The lie came smooth, practiced. Mason recognized it because he'd told versions of it himself. Different circumstances, same desperate attempt to protect a child from harsh truths. The girl accepted this without question, the way kids do when they're too young to understand or too tired to argue. When Doris came back, the woman ordered 1 plate of chocolate chip pancakes and a glass of water. Nothing else. Doris wrote it down without comment, but Mason saw the way her expression tightened, the way she glanced at the pile of coins on the table. The phone in Mason's pocket buzzed again. Liam, probably. His assistant. Checking in, making sure he was okay, because apparently Mason had become the kind of person people checked on. He left it alone. The pancakes arrived faster than they should have. Doris must have told the cook to rush it, and the little girl's face lit up like someone had plugged her into an electrical socket. "Thank you, Mommy." "You're welcome, Sophie." The woman's voice cracked on the name. Sophie. Mason turned the name over in his mind. A good name. His wife would have liked it. He watched the kid eat with the single-minded intensity of someone who hadn't had a proper meal in too long. The mother didn't touch the food. Didn't even look at it. She kept her eyes on her daughter, and the expression on her face was so raw, so full of love and desperation and bone-deep weariness that Mason had to look away. His coffee had gone cold. He signaled Doris for a refill, and when she came over, he kept his voice low. "That woman and her daughter, what's their bill?" Doris glanced over her shoulder, then back at him. Her eyes narrowed slightly. "Why?" "Just tell me." $6.50 with tax." Mason pulled out his wallet, leather, Italian, worth more than that woman probably made in a week, and extracted 2 20s. "This covers theirs and mine. Whatever's left is yours." "Look, I don't know what you're thinking." "I'm not thinking anything." He met her eyes. "Just do it quietly. Don't tell her it was me." Doris studied him for a long moment, then pocketed the bills. "You're going to make me cry into the meatloaf, and I got 3 hours left on my shift." "You'll survive." She left, and Mason went back to watching the snow. He should leave, should go home to his own kid, to the housekeeper who'd stayed late to make sure Liam wasn't alone on Christmas Eve, to the professionally decorated tree in the living room that looked like something out of a magazine and felt just as sterile. He didn't move. 10 minutes later, Doris returned to the woman's table with the check. Mason couldn't hear the conversation, but he saw the moment the woman looked at the bill, saw the way her face went blank with confusion. "There must be a mistake," she said, loud enough for him to catch. "This says 0. "No mistake, Ma." Doris's voice was gentle. "Someone took care of it. Merry Christmas." "Who? I can't accept." "Don't know who, hun. They wanted to stay anonymous." Doris patted her shoulder. "Just accept the kindness, okay? You look like you could use some." The woman's eyes filled with tears. She pressed a hand to her mouth, shoulders shaking with silent sobs she was trying desperately to control in front of her daughter. The little girl, Sophie, looked up with wide, worried eyes. "Mommy, why are you crying?" "Happy tears, baby. Just happy tears." Mason's throat felt tight. He stood up, intending to slip out while they were distracted, but Doris caught his arm as he passed the counter. "That was a good thing you did." "It was $40. Barely qualifies as good." "To her it does." Doris squeezed his arm. "You have kids?" "A son, 7. "He's lucky." Mason didn't know what to say to that, so he didn't say anything. He pushed out into the snow, into air so cold it burned his lungs, and made it maybe 10 steps before he stopped. The woman and her daughter were still inside. Through the frosted window, he could see them gathering their things, what few things they had. The woman helping Sophie into that inadequate coat, adjusting her hat, movement slow and careful like someone running on fumes. Where were they going? It was Christmas Eve, nearly 10:30, and the temperature was dropping into the single digits. "Not your problem," a voice in his head said. It sounded like his father. "You can't save everyone." He'd been telling himself that for 3 years. It had never gotten easier to believe. The diner door opened. The woman emerged with Sophie clutched close to her side, both of them bracing against the wind. They turned left, heading north, and Mason stood there like an idiot watching them disappear into the snow. Then he was moving. "Hey!" His voice came out rougher than intended. They both turned, the woman instinctively pulling her daughter behind her with a wariness that spoke of hard experience. "I'm sorry. I didn't mean to. I'm not." He stopped, took a breath. "My name is Mason. I was in the diner. I just wanted to make sure you're okay. It's dangerous out here." The woman's jaw tightened. "We're fine." It's 10:30 on Christmas Eve, and the wind chill is below zero. "I said we're fine." But her voice wavered, and she was shivering so hard her teeth chattered. Sophie peered around her mother's legs. "Are you the man who bought us dinner?" "Damn." "Sophie, how did you know her name?" The woman's voice went sharp with fear. She took a step back, pulling Sophie with her. "I heard you say it. In the diner. Look, I'm just trying to help." "We don't need help." "Yes, you do." The words came out before he could stop them, blunt and absolute. "I'm sorry, but you clearly do." "Where are you staying tonight?" "That's none of your business." "You're right. It's not. But I'm making it my business because that little girl is freezing and you don't have anywhere to go." He saw the flash of recognition in her eyes, the acknowledgement that he'd guessed correctly, before she shuddered it away. "I'm not going to hurt you. I just want to help." "Why?" The question was almost a challenge. "Why do you care?" Mason looked at Sophie, at this kid who was probably the same age his son had been when her mother died, and something in his chest cracked open. Because someone should. The silence stretched. Snow accumulated on their shoulders, their hair. Somewhere in the distance, a siren wailed. "We're staying at a shelter," the woman finally said, "on Franklin Street. The one on Franklin closed last month, budget cuts." Her face went white. "What?" "It closed. I donated to the organization. They sent a letter explaining why." He watched her process this, watched the last bit of color drain from her cheeks. "You didn't know?" "We've been..." She swallowed hard. "We've been in Milwaukee. We just got back today. I thought the website said..." "Where's your car?" "Don't have one anymore." "Family?" "No." "Friends?" She just looked at him, and the answer was written all over her face. Mason pulled out his phone. "I'm calling you a car. There's a hotel 3 blocks from here, the Whitmore. I'm getting you a room for the night." "I can't afford..." "I'm paying." "No." Her voice turned fierce. "I don't take charity." "It's not charity, it's Christmas." He was already pulling up the car service app. "Please, just for tonight. You can't take that kid out in this weather with nowhere to go." "I'll figure something out." "How?" "Every shelter in the area is full. I know because I fund half of them." He looked up from his phone. "Let me do this. Just tonight. Then tomorrow you can tell me to go to hell if you want. But tonight, let me make sure you're both safe and warm." She was crying again, silently, tears freezing on her cheeks. Sophie had pressed her face against her mother's coat, small body trembling. "Why are you doing this?" The woman's voice was barely a whisper. "Because my son is at home right now, warm and safe, and he's your daughter's age, and I can't..." Mason stopped, surprised by the emotion in his own voice. "I can't walk away knowing she's out here. I just can't." The woman closed her eyes, opened them. "One night." "One night," Mason agreed, even though he was already planning for more. "The car will be here in 3 minutes. Come on." They stood under the diner's awning, 3 strangers huddled against the cold. Mason could feel the woman watching him with a mixture of suspicion and desperate hope. Sophie had stopped shivering quite so hard, now that they were out of the wind. "I'm Elena," the woman finally said. "Elena Hart. And this is Sophie." Mason Reed. He saw recognition flicker in her eyes. His name was on buildings, in newspapers, but she didn't comment. It's nice to meet you both. The car pulled up, a black sedan with heated seats and a driver who took one look at Sophie's blue lips and cranked the heat without being asked. Mason opened the door, helped them inside, then leaned down to speak to the driver. The Whitmore Hotel. I'll send the booking confirmation to your phone. He pulled out his wallet again, extracted $500 bills, and pressed them into Elena's hand before she could protest. For food, clothes, whatever you need. I can't. Yes, you can. He closed her fingers around the money. Merry Christmas, Elena. He shut the door before she could argue further, watched the car pull away into the snow. Stood there until the taillights disappeared, feeling something shift in his chest. A weight he'd been carrying so long, he'd forgotten it was there, suddenly lighter. His phone rang. This time he answered. Mason, where are you? His mother-in-law, Catherine. Liam's asking for you. I'm on my way. Tell him 10 minutes. Is everything okay? You sound... I'm fine, Catherine. Just ran into something unexpected. On Christmas Eve in a blizzard? What kind of something? Mason looked back at the Golden Lantern Diner, at the flickering neon sign that had drawn him in off the street. The kind that reminds you why we're supposed to be kind to each other. Catherine was quiet for a moment. Your wife would be proud of you. The words hit harder than they should have. I'll be home soon. He ended the call and started walking toward where he'd left his car. But he couldn't shake the image of Elena's face, the exhaustion, the fear, the fierce protective love. Couldn't stop thinking about Sophie's blue lips and that broken pom-pom on her hat. One night wasn't going to be enough. He'd known that the moment he'd opened his mouth, the moment he'd made it his business. One night wouldn't fix whatever had put them in that position, wouldn't give Elena her husband back, wouldn't restore whatever life they'd lost. But it was a start. Mason pulled out his phone again as he reached his Mercedes, brushing snow off the windshield with his free hand. Found Liam's number in his favorites. Boss? Everything okay? I need you to do something for me, tomorrow, first thing. It's Christmas. I know. I'll pay you triple time. Liam sighed. What do you need? There's a woman named Elena Hart. She's going to be at the Whitmore Hotel. I need you to find out everything you can about her situation, why she's homeless, what happened to her husband, what she needs. And I need you to schedule her for an interview the day after Christmas. Interview for what? Whatever job she's qualified for. Find out her background and create a position if you have to. Something with benefits, something stable. Mason, you can't just hire random people off the street. I can if they work for me. He climbed into the car, turned the heat on high. And I need you to extend the hotel booking, a week minimum. Send up clothes for both of them, toiletries, food, everything they might need. Charge it to my personal account. How old's the kid? 5 or 6, blonde, pink hat. He could hear Liam typing. You're going soft. Don't push it. You know the board's going to have opinions about this kind of spending. The board doesn't get opinions about how I spend my own money. Mason put the car in gear, pulled out into the empty street. Just do it, Liam. Please. Yeah, okay. More typing. For what it's worth. This is a good thing you're doing. Mason thought about Elena counting change for pancakes she wouldn't eat, about the way her hands shook when she'd tried to refuse his help. We'll see. The drive home took 20 minutes through snow-clogged streets. His house was in Lincoln Park. 3 stories of meticulously restored brick, 12 rooms, more space than 2 people could ever need. The Christmas lights were on, white and tasteful, professionally installed. They'd run him $15,000. Elena probably couldn't have scraped together $15. Catherine met him at the door, still in her coat. Liam's finally asleep. He waited up as long as he could. I'm sorry, I got held up. So I gathered. She studied his face. You want to talk about it? Not really. Mason, I met someone tonight. A woman with a daughter. They needed help. He shrugged off his jacket, hung it in the closet next to a dozen others. I helped them. And? And nothing. That's it. Catherine's expression softened. Sarah would have done the same thing. His wife's name still hurt, even after 3 years. I know. You're a good man. I hope you know that. I'm working on it. He headed for the stairs. Thanks for staying with Liam. Of course, he's my grandson. She paused. Will you be here for Christmas dinner tomorrow? Wouldn't miss it. He climbed the stairs to his son's room, eased the door open. Liam was sprawled across his bed, covers kicked off, looking so much like Sarah it made Mason's chest ache. 7 years old and already learning to hide his sadness behind smiles, to pretend the hole his mother left wasn't still raw and bleeding. Mason pulled the covers up, kissed his son's forehead. "Love you, buddy." Liam stirred but didn't wake. In his own room, Mason stood at the window and looked out at the snow-covered city. Somewhere out there, Elena and Sophie were checking into a warm hotel room. Somewhere, they were safe. It wasn't enough. It would never be enough. But it was something. He pulled out his phone, sent a text to Liam. "Add a Christmas tree to the delivery tomorrow. Decorations, presents for a 6-year-old girl. Make it special." The response came back immediately. "You're definitely going soft." Mason smiled despite himself. Maybe that wasn't such a bad thing. He thought about calling the hotel, checking to make sure they'd arrived safely, but that felt like overstepping. Elena had made it clear she didn't want charity. Didn't want to be watched over like some kind of project. He'd have to tread carefully if he wanted to actually help, instead of just making himself feel better. His phone buzzed with an email notification. The hotel confirmation. Elena and Sophie Hart checked in, room 412. 4 floors up, away from the street noise. Good. Then another email, this one from the booking. Additional charges authorized for room service, gift shop. Elena was using the money he'd given her. Smart. Get what they needed while they had the chance. Mason set an alarm for 6 a.m. He'd go to the hotel in the morning, bring breakfast, make sure they were okay. Then he'd figure out the rest. Outside, the snow had stopped. The city lay quiet under its white blanket, peaceful and cold and full of people fighting battles nobody else could see. For the first time in 3 years, Mason Reed went to sleep on Christmas Eve, feeling like maybe, just maybe, he'd done something that mattered. In a hotel room 4 miles away, Elena Hart sat on the edge of a bed softer than anything she'd slept on in 6 months and watched her daughter sleep under clean white sheets. The heating worked. The shower had hot water. There was food in the mini-fridge and clean clothes coming in the morning, courtesy of a stranger who'd seen her at her lowest and chosen kindness instead of judgment. She should have been relieved, should have been grateful. Instead, she was terrified, because kindness always came with a price, and she'd learned the hard way that accepting help meant giving up control, meant owing someone, meant making yourself vulnerable to disappointment and betrayal and all the ways people could hurt you when you let them get close. But Sophie was warm. Sophie was safe. Sophie had fallen asleep with a full stomach and a smile on her face, and Elena would walk through fire for that. Even if it meant trusting a billionaire she'd met in a diner. Even if it meant letting someone see how broken she really was. She looked at the stack of $100 bills on the nightstand, more money than she'd seen in months, and made herself a promise. She would accept this help, just for tonight. Would let Sophie have one good Christmas. Then tomorrow, she'd thank Mason Reed, return whatever money they hadn't spent, and figure out a way forward that didn't involve handouts from strangers. She'd been taking care of herself and Sophie since Marcus died. She could keep doing it. She had to. Outside the window, Chicago sparkled under its coat of snow, a million lights burning against the darkness. Somewhere out there, a man who'd lost his wife was lying awake thinking about kindness and second chances, and the way grief could hollow you out until you forgot what it felt like to be whole. Neither of them knew it yet, but their lives had just collided in a way that would change everything. Neither of them knew that one night of kindness would turn into something neither of them expected and both of them desperately needed. Neither of them knew that the family they'd both lost was about to be rebuilt, piece by broken piece, into something new. But they'd find out, starting tomorrow. Starting with Christmas morning. Elena woke to sunlight streaming through curtains she didn't remember closing. For a confused moment, she didn't know where she was. The mattress was too soft, the sheets too clean, the silence too complete. Then it came back in a rush. The diner, the stranger, the car ride through the snow. The hotel room that felt like stepping into someone else's life. Sophie was still asleep beside her, curled into a tight ball the way she always did, thumb halfway to her mouth. Elena had been trying to break that habit for months, but lately she'd stopped fighting it. The kid needed whatever comfort she could get. The clock on the nightstand read 7:23 a.m., Christmas morning, the first one without Marcus. Elena's throat tightened. She pushed herself up, careful not to wake Sophie, and padded to the window. 4 stories below, the streets were empty except for a few early risers walking dogs. The snow had stopped sometime in the night, leaving everything covered in white that would turn to gray slush by afternoon. Chicago didn't stay pretty for long. Her phone, the cheap prepaid one with the cracked screen, showed 3 missed calls from a number she didn't recognize and 1 text message. "This is Liam Chen, assistant to Mason Reed. A delivery will arrive at your room at 9 a.m. Please accept it with Mr. Reed's compliments. Merry Christmas." Elena stared at the message. She should have felt grateful, should have felt relieved that someone was helping without asking for anything in return. Instead, she felt that familiar knot of anxiety tightening in her chest. This was too much, too fast. Men didn't just hand out money in hotel rooms and Christmas deliveries unless they wanted something. Marcus had been different. Marcus had been good. But Marcus was dead, and Elena had learned the hard way that not everyone who smiled at you had good intentions. She was still holding the phone when Sophie stirred. "Mommy?" "Right here, baby." Sophie sat up, rubbing her eyes, then looked around the room with dawning wonder. "We're still here. I thought I dreamed it." "No dream. We're really here." "Can we stay?" The question hit harder than it should have. "Just for a little while." "How long?" "I don't know yet." Elena sat on the edge of the bed, brushed hair out of Sophie's face. "But today is Christmas, so let's not worry about tomorrow, okay?" Sophie's face lit up in a way Elena hadn't seen in months. "It's Christmas. I forgot it was Christmas." "I know, sweetie." "Do you think Santa knows we're here?" Elena's chest ached. She and Marcus had always gone overboard with Christmas. The tree, the presents, the stockings stuffed with candy and small toys. Last year, Sophie had gotten a bike with training wheels and a doll that said 15 different phrases. This year, Elena had managed to scrape together enough for a coloring book and a pack of crayons. And even those were still sitting in the motel room they'd been kicked out of 2 days ago. "I think Santa is very busy on Christmas," Elena said carefully, "but I bet he's thinking about you." Sophie seemed to accept this, which was a small mercy. "Can we have breakfast?" "Absolutely. Let's see what we can find." The room service menu was leather-bound and extensive. Elena looked at the prices and felt sick. $18 for eggs, $22 for pancakes. She still had most of the money Mason had given her, but spending it on overpriced hotel food felt wrong when they could walk to a convenience store and get cereal for $3. She was trying to figure out the math when someone knocked on the door. Elena froze. "Stay here, baby." She checked the peephole, hotel security training from a job she'd had 5 years ago, back when life made sense. A young Asian man in an expensive suit stood in the hallway next to a rolling cart piled high with boxes and bags. He saw her shadow at the peephole and held up an ID badge. "Ms. Hart? I'm Liam Chen. We texted earlier." Elena opened the door a crack, keeping the chain on. "It's barely 8 o'clock." "I know. I'm sorry. Mr. Reed wanted to make sure you had everything you needed for Christmas morning." Liam gestured to the cart. "May I bring these in?" Elena looked at the pile of packages, at this man who'd probably rather be home with his own family, and felt that anxiety spike again. "This is too much." "Mr. Reed disagrees." Liam's smile was polite but firm. "Please, it'll just take a minute." Against her better judgment, Elena opened the door. Liam wheeled the cart inside with practiced efficiency, began unloading boxes onto the dresser and table. Clothes. Women's sizes and various styles, still tagged. Children's clothes in pinks and purples. Toiletries. A bag from a toy store that made Sophie's eyes go wide. "There's also breakfast," Liam said, uncovering dishes on the bottom shelf of the cart. "Hot chocolate, pancakes, eggs, bacon, fruit." Mr. Reed wasn't sure what you liked, so he ordered variety. The smell hit Elena all at once. Real food, hot and fresh, and her stomach clenched with hunger she'd been ignoring for days. Sophie made a small sound of longing. We can't accept all this." "With respect, ma'am, you already did when you checked in last night." Liam finished unloading, straightened up. "Mr. Reed will be here around 10, if that's acceptable. He wanted to check in, make sure you're settled." "Why is he doing this?" The question came out sharper than Elena intended. "What does he want?" Liam's expression softened slightly. "He wants to help, that's all. I've worked for him for 3 years, and I can tell you he's not..." He's one of the good ones, Ms. Hart. He doesn't have ulterior motives. He just saw someone who needed help and decided to provide it. People don't just do that. Mason Reed does. Liam handed her a business card. Simple, elegant, just a name and phone number. If you need anything before he arrives, call me. The hotel knows to charge everything to his account. Meals, laundry, anything in the gift shop. Don't hesitate. He left before Elena could formulate a response, the door clicking shut with a finality that made her feel trapped and cared for in equal measure. Sophie was already at the cart, eyes locked on the toy store bag. "Mommy, can I look?" Elena wanted to say no, wanted to pack everything back up and leave it in the hallway, take Sophie and walk out before they got any more tangled in this billionaire's charity. But Sophie's face was so hopeful, so full of the kind of childish excitement that had been missing since Marcus died, and Elena couldn't bring herself to crush it. "Okay, but just look. We might have to give some of this back." Sophie pulled out the bag carefully, reverently, like it might disappear if she moved too fast. Inside were wrapped presents, 4 of them, different sizes, all with neat bows and gift tags that said "for Sophie" in handwriting that was definitely not Mason's. Probably Liam's. Probably something he'd done at midnight or 6 in the morning because his boss had asked. "Can I open one?" Sophie's voice was barely a whisper. Elena looked at her daughter, at the hope and fear warring on her face, at the way her small hands clutched the package like it was made of glass, and something inside her cracked. "Yeah, baby, you can open them." The first present was a stuffed polar bear, soft and white with a red scarf. Sophie hugged it immediately, buried her face in its fur. "He's perfect." The second was a set of building blocks, the expensive kind that came in a wooden box. The third was a children's book about a girl and her dragon. The fourth was an art set, markers, crayons, colored pencils, paper, stickers that made Sophie gasp. "Mommy, look! I can draw again!" Elena's eyes burned. She'd had to leave Sophie's art supplies at the motel when they got evicted, along with most of their other possessions. Had watched her daughter cry over the abandoned crayons, and there'd been nothing Elena could do except promise they'd get new ones someday. Now Sophie was spreading markers across the hotel room floor, already planning her first drawing, and Elena had to turn away before the tears spilled over. She focused on the food instead. Made plates for both of them, hot chocolate for Sophie, and coffee for herself from the machine in the room. They ate sitting on the floor next to Sophie's new toys, and for a few minutes Elena let herself pretend this was normal, that they lived here, that this was their life. Then reality crashed back in, and she pulled out her phone to look at her bank balance. $47. That was it. Everything she had in the world, plus the cash Mason had given her, which didn't really count because it wasn't hers to keep. Her phone rang, the same unknown number from earlier. "Hello? Elena, it's Catherine Harris, Mason's mother-in-law." The voice was warm, professional, with an edge of something that might have been concern. "I hope I'm not calling too early." "No, it's fine. How did you get this number?" "Liam gave it to me. I'm sorry to intrude, but Mason mentioned what happened last night, and I wanted to reach out. I work with several family services organizations in Chicago, and I thought I might be able to help." Elena's defenses went up immediately. "I appreciate that, but we're fine. Are you?" Catherine's tone was gentle but direct. "Because Mason said you were heading to a shelter that doesn't exist anymore. That suggests you're not fine." "With respect, Mrs. Harris, this isn't your business." "You're right, it's not. But I'm making it my business anyway." There was a pause. "I lost my daughter 3 years ago, Sarah, Mason's wife, and I've spent every day since trying to figure out how to help people the way she would have wanted me to. So please, let me help you, no strings attached." Elena closed her eyes. "Why does everyone in your family think they can fix strangers?" "Because sometimes strangers are just people who haven't become friends yet." Catherine's voice softened. "I'm not trying to fix you, Elena. I'm trying to offer resources. There's a difference." "What kind of resources?" "Well, for starters, I know you need a job. Mason mentioned he's setting up an interview, which is wonderful, but it's not immediate income. I can connect you with emergency assistance programs, food, clothing, temporary housing support. And if you're interested, I run a professional development program for women in transition. Job training, resume building, interview prep, all free." It sounded too good to be true, which in Elena's experience meant it probably was. What's the catch? No catch, just a lot of paperwork and a commitment to showing up. Sophie was coloring now, tongue caught between her teeth in concentration, completely absorbed in her new markers. Elena watched her daughter and felt the weight of every decision pressing down on her shoulders. Can I think about it? Of course. I'll have Liam send you my contact information. Call me when you're ready. Catherine hesitated. And Elena? Merry Christmas. I hope today is better than yesterday. The line went dead before Elena could respond. She sat there for a long moment, phone in hand, trying to process the fact that strangers were organizing her life without asking permission. It should have made her angry. Instead, she just felt tired. By 9:30, Sophie had drawn 3 pictures: a polar bear, a Christmas tree, and a family of stick figures that made Elena's chest hurt. By 9:45, Elena had showered for the first time in 3 days, using hotel shampoo that smelled like lavender and felt like luxury. By 9:55, she'd dressed in new jeans and a sweater from the pile Liam had delivered, both of which fit perfectly despite the fact that she'd never provided her size. At exactly 10 o'clock, someone knocked on the door. Elena checked the peephole. Mason Reed stood in the hallway looking nothing like a billionaire. Jeans again, a navy sweater, the same worn leather jacket from last night. His hair was slightly messy, like he'd forgotten to comb it, and he was carrying a small Christmas tree. She opened the door. "Hi," Mason said. "I brought reinforcements." The tree was maybe 3 feet tall, already decorated with lights and small ornaments, sitting in a pot wrapped in red foil. Behind Mason stood a little boy clutching a bag of wrapped presents, looking simultaneously excited and terrified. "This is my son, Liam," Mason said. "We thought Sophie might like some company." The boy, not Liam Chen, a different Liam, stepped forward and held out his hand with the careful formality of a child who'd been coached. "It's nice to meet you. Merry Christmas." Elena shook his hand, feeling ambushed and touched in equal measure. "Merry Christmas to you, too." Sophie appeared at Elena's elbow, peeking around her mother's legs. "Hi." "Hi," Liam said. "I'm 7. How old are you?" 6. Almost 6.5. "Cool. Do you like building things? I brought blocks." Just like that, the 2 kids were on the floor, Sophie showing off her new toys while Liam unpacked the presents he'd brought. Mason and Elena stood in the doorway watching, neither quite sure what to say. "This is too much," Elena finally managed. "Probably." Mason set the tree on the dresser, adjusted it slightly. "But it's Christmas, and I figured Sophie deserved a real one, even if it's small. You can't just keep giving us things." "Why not?" "Because we can't pay you back." Mason turned to look at her, and his expression was so open, so genuinely confused, that Elena felt her anger deflate. "I don't want you to pay me back. That's not how this works." "Then how does it work? Because in my experience, nothing is free." "In your experience, you've been dealing with the wrong people." He gestured to the kids. "Can we sit? I'd like to talk to you about something." They sat at the small table by the window, far enough from the kids to have privacy, but close enough to keep an eye on them. Outside, the city was waking up, church bells, distant traffic, the muffled sounds of Christmas morning. "Liam told you about the interview," Mason said. It wasn't a question. "Yes. I want you to know it's real, not a pity offer. I looked into your background. I hope you don't mind. And you have experience in hospitality management, hotel front desk, event coordination, good references from jobs you held before." He trailed off delicately. "Before my husband died." Elena finished the sentence because someone had to. "Before we lost everything and ended up homeless." Mason didn't flinch. "Yes, I have an opening in my company's corporate hospitality division. It's not glamorous, coordinating internal events, managing client visits, some travel logistics. But it pays well, has full benefits, and it's stable. I think you'd be good at it." "You don't even know me. I know you counted change for pancakes you wouldn't eat so your daughter could have dinner. I know you were walking into a blizzard on Christmas Eve rather than ask for help. That tells me more about your character than any resume could." Elena looked away, blinking hard. "What if I'm terrible at the job? Then we'll figure it out. But I don't think you will be." He leaned forward slightly. "Elena, I'm not trying to rescue you. I'm trying to offer you an opportunity. What you do with it is entirely up to you." Why? The question came out raw. Why do you care? You don't owe us anything. Mason was quiet for a long moment, watching the kids. Liam had taught Sophie how to stack the blocks into a tower, and they were both giggling as it inevitably collapsed. My wife died 3 years ago. Cancer. It was fast, 8 months from diagnosis to funeral, and for a long time after, I was just empty, going through the motions, taking care of my son because I had to, running my company because it was easier than sitting still. I forgot what it felt like to do something that mattered. He turned back to Elena, and she saw the same exhaustion in his eyes that she felt in her bones. Last night, when I saw you in that diner, I saw someone who was fighting, who wasn't giving up even though it would have been easier to. And I thought maybe helping you would remind me what that felt like. Being useful, being human. So this is for you, Elena said, but there was no accusation in it, just understanding. Maybe, partly, Mason's smile was sad. But mostly it's because I can help, and it costs me nothing to do it. And my son is happier right now than he's been in months because he got to play Santa Claus. So yeah, selfish and selfless all mixed up together. Elena looked at the two kids again. They'd moved on to Sophie's new art set, both of them drawing with fierce concentration. Liam was explaining something about dinosaurs, and Sophie was listening with rapt attention. Okay, she said quietly. Okay? Okay, I'll take the interview and the hotel room for now, and the help from your mother-in-law. Elena met his eyes. But I'm going to pay you back someday. Maybe not with money, but somehow, because I don't like owing people. Fair enough. Mason stood, held out his hand. Deal. She shook it, and his grip was firm and warm and steadier than she felt. Thank you. You're welcome. He glanced at his watch. I should probably let you get back to your Christmas. But if you need anything, and I mean anything, Liam's number is programmed into your phone. The other Liam, my assistant, he'll help. You programmed your assistant's number into my phone without asking? I took some liberties. Mason had the grace to look slightly embarrassed. In my defense, it seemed practical. Despite everything, Elena laughed. It felt strange, rusty, like a muscle she'd forgotten how to use. You're very pushy for a billionaire. I prefer persistent. He called to his son. Liam, we should head out. Let Sophie have Christmas with her mom. 5 more minutes? Young Liam looked up with pleading eyes. We're almost done with the castle. Mason looked at Elena. If it's okay with Ms. Hart. Elena, please. And yes, 5 minutes is fine. But 5 minutes turned into 10, then 20, and somehow Mason ended up on the floor helping with the castle, while Elena made more hot chocolate and watched these two broken families fit together like puzzle pieces that didn't know they'd been looking for each other. Young Liam kept glancing at his father with something that looked like relief. Sophie hadn't smiled this much in 6 months, and Elena found herself sitting next to Mason on the carpet, passing him blocks, engaging in small talk that felt remarkably normal considering they'd met 12 hours ago. Your mother-in-law seems nice, Elena said. Catherine? She's the best. Basically raised Liam after Sarah died because I was useless for about a year. Mason didn't sound bitter, just matter of fact. She keeps me honest. How long were you married? 9 years, together for 12. He stacked another block carefully. You? 8 years married, 10 together. Elena's voice went quiet. Marcus. He was a contractor. Good with his hands, terrible with money. We were always scraping by, but we were happy. What happened? Accident on a job site. Fell 3 stories. Died before the ambulance arrived. The words came out flat, recited. She'd said them so many times they'd stopped meaning anything. No life insurance because we couldn't afford it. No savings. The hospital bills took everything. Lost the apartment 6 weeks later, the car a month after that. And here we are. Mason's hand stilled on the blocks. I'm sorry. Yeah, me too. They sat in silence while the kids chattering about their castle, about Christmas, about nothing and everything. Elena could feel Mason watching her, not with pity exactly, but with understanding, like he knew what it felt like to have your life ripped apart and be expected to just keep going. It gets easier, he said finally. Not better, not okay, but easier. Does it? Some days. He added another block to the tower. Some days it still hits me out of nowhere, and I can't breathe. But those days are further apart now than they used to be. Elena nodded. She didn't trust herself to speak. Another knock at the door interrupted the moment. Elena answered it to find a hotel employee with another cart, this one loaded with wrapped boxes. "Delivery for Miss Hart and Mrs. Sophie Hart," the woman said cheerfully. "Merry Christmas." Elena stared. "I didn't order anything." "They're from the Reed Foundation." The employee wheeled the cart inside. "Mr. Reed wanted to make sure you had Christmas presents." Mason stood up, brushing off his jeans. "That might have been Catherine. She's very enthusiastic about holidays." "Mason." "I didn't know she was doing this, I swear." Elena counted at least a dozen boxes, all beautifully wrapped, all with tags that said either Elena or Sophie. It was too much. Way too much. She opened her mouth to say so, but Sophie had already noticed. "Mommy, look! More presents!" And there it was, pure joy on her daughter's face, the kind of uncomplicated happiness that 6-year-olds were supposed to have. Elena couldn't take that away. Not on Christmas. "Okay," she said, defeated. "Okay, we'll keep them, but this has to stop. No more deliveries, no more surprises. This is enough." "I'll talk to Catherine," Mason promised, but he was smiling. The hotel employee left, and for the next hour the hotel room became a chaos of wrapping paper and laughter. Sophie opened gifts, clothes that actually fit, books, more toys, a warm winter coat with a hood, while Liam helped her and offered commentary on each one. Elena opened her own presents, practical things like boots and a purse and a professional work bag, but also a cashmere scarf that made her cry because she hadn't owned anything that soft in years. Mason sat back and watched, and Elena caught him looking at his son with an expression of such profound gratitude that she had to look away. By noon, the kids were crashed on the bed, exhausted from excitement, Sophie clutching her polar bear and Liam reading her the dragon book in a quiet voice. Mason and Elena stood at the window watching the snow-covered city. "Thank you," Elena said. "I know I keep saying that, but I mean it. This is the best Christmas Sophie's had in a long time. She's a good kid." "She is." Elena paused. "So is yours. You're doing a good job with him." "I'm trying. Most days I feel like I'm failing." "Welcome to parenthood." Mason laughed softly. "Yeah." They stood there in comfortable silence until Mason's phone buzzed. He checked it, sighed. "Catherine wants us for dinner. I should probably go before she sends a search party." "Of course." He called to Liam, who looked up reluctantly from the book. "Do we have to? Grandma's making her famous lasagna. Can Sophie come?" Mason looked at Elena, eyebrows raised in question. "You're both welcome, if you want." Elena's first instinct was to say no, to maintain boundaries, keep distance, not get any more tangled in this family's generosity. But Sophie was already sitting up, looking hopeful, and Elena was so tired of disappointing her. "Are you sure? We don't want to intrude." Catherine made enough food for 20 people. She always does. And honestly, it would make Liam happy. He doesn't usually warm up to people this fast. "Okay," Elena heard herself say. "We'll come. Thank you." The smile on Sophie's face was worth whatever complications this would create later. They left the hotel at 2. Mason's Mercedes navigating the snowy streets while the kids chattered in the back seat. Catherine's house was in Evanston, a brick Tudor that looked like something out of a magazine, with Christmas lights strung along the roofline and a wreath on the front door. Catherine herself answered, a woman in her early 60s with silver hair and the kind of warm presence that made you want to tell her your problems. "You must be Elena, and this beautiful girl is Sophie. Come in, come in. You'll freeze out there." The house smelled like tomato sauce and garlic bread and pine. A massive Christmas tree dominated the living room, covered in ornaments that looked handmade and loved. Photos covered every surface, Sarah, Mason, and Sarah together, baby Liam, family portraits spanning decades. "I'm so glad you could join us," Catherine said, taking their coats. "It's been just the 3 of us the last couple years. It's nice to have a fuller table." Dinner was chaotic in the best way. Catherine asked questions without being intrusive, told stories about Sarah that made Mason smile despite the sadness in his eyes, and treated Sophie like she'd known her for years. The kids ate until they couldn't move, then disappeared to play with Liam's toys while the adults cleaned up. "So," Catherine said, elbow deep in soapy water. Mason tells me you're interviewing for a position at Reed Tech, if the offer's still open. Elena dried plates with mechanical efficiency. I know it's a lot to take on faith. Mason has good instincts about people. Catherine handed her another plate. And I looked at your resume. You're qualified. Liam sent you my resume? I asked for it. I like to know who my son-in-law is helping. Catherine's smile took any sting out of the words. I also wanted to tell you about that program I mentioned, the one for women in transition. We have a cohort starting in 2 weeks. Job training, networking, childcare assistance. I think you'd benefit from it. Elena set down the plate. Mrs. Harris, Catherine, I appreciate everything you and Mason are doing, really, but I need to do this on my own. I need to prove I can take care of Sophie without handouts. Taking help isn't the same as taking handouts. Catherine turned to face her, hands dripping. I spent 30 years as a social worker before I retired, Elena. I've seen hundreds of women in your position. The ones who make it aren't the ones who refuse help. They're the ones who accept it gracefully, use it wisely, and pay it forward when they can. I don't know how to do that. None of us do at first. Catherine dried her hands, then took Elena's gently. But you'll learn, and we'll help. From the living room came the sound of children laughing, and Elena felt something in her chest loosen slightly. Maybe it was okay to accept this. Maybe fighting alone wasn't the same as being strong. Okay, she said quietly. Tell me about the program. They talked for an hour while Mason put the kids in front of a Christmas movie and tried not to eavesdrop. By the time Elena and Sophie left, driven back to the hotel by Mason, with leftovers packed by Catherine and promises to call about the program, Elena felt more hopeful than she had in months. Thank you for today, she said as Mason pulled up to the Whitmore. For everything. You're welcome. He put the car in park, turned to face her. The interview is the day after tomorrow, 10 a.m. Liam will send you the details. I'll be there? I know you will. He smiled. And Elena? You're going to be okay. Both of you. She wanted to believe him. Almost did. In the back seat, Sophie was half asleep, clutching her polar bear. Elena gathered her daughter and the leftovers and headed inside, into the warm lobby that still felt surreal. The elevator ride up was quiet. Sophie mumbled something about Liam being nice, about wanting to see him again. Elena stroked her hair and didn't make promises she couldn't keep. In their room, she tucked Sophie into bed and stood at the window, looking out at the city lights. Tomorrow, they'd still be here. The day after, she'd have an interview that could change their lives. Next week, she'd start a program that might help her rebuild. It wasn't a guarantee. Nothing was. But it was more than she'd had yesterday. Her phone buzzed, a text from an unknown number. This is Catherine. I forgot to give you this earlier. Here's the program information. And Elena? You're stronger than you think. Sleep well. Elena read the message 3 times, then saved the number. Set an alarm for the morning. Checked her email to find details from Liam Chen about the interview, along with a note. Mr. Reed wanted me to mention the position comes with relocation assistance if needed. And there's a childcare center on site at Reed Tech. She sat on the edge of the bed, phone in hand, and let herself cry. Not sad tears this time. Just overwhelmed, exhausted, cautiously hopeful tears that she'd been holding back for 6 months. Sophie slept peacefully, her polar bear tucked under one arm. Outside, Chicago hummed with life. And somewhere across the city, Mason Reed was putting his own son to bed and thinking about second chances and the strange ways grief could lead you to exactly where you needed to be. Neither of them knew what came next, but for the first time in a long time, both of them were willing to find out. The interview was in 45 minutes, and Elena had changed her outfit 3 times. She stood in front of the hotel bathroom mirror in a navy blazer and slacks, both from Catherine's Christmas delivery, and tried to convince herself she looked like someone who belonged in a corporate office. Someone competent. Someone who hadn't been sleeping in her car 2 weeks ago. You look pretty, Mommy. Sophie sat on the bathroom counter, swinging her legs. The hotel had sent up breakfast an hour ago. Apparently Mason had arranged for daily room service, despite Elena's protests, and Sophie had syrup on her chin. Thanks, baby. Elena wiped the syrup away with a damp towel. You're sure you're okay going to Grandma Catherine's for a few hours? Uh-huh. She said we're making cookies. Catherine had insisted on watching Sophie during the interview, had shown up at 8:30 with a bag full of baking supplies and a confidence in Elena that felt unearned. She was down in the lobby now, probably charming the front desk staff and reorganizing their filing system. Elena's phone buzzed. Liam Chen. Car is waiting outside when you're ready. You'll do great. She took one last look in the mirror, grabbed the portfolio Catherine had given her, leather, professional, containing copies of her resume and references that Liam had somehow tracked down, and headed for the door. Catherine was exactly where Elena expected, chatting with the concierge about community outreach programs. She looked up when Elena approached, and her face broke into an encouraging smile. You look perfect, very professional. I feel like I'm playing dress-up. Fake it until you make it. That's what I did for 30 years. Catherine held out her hand to Sophie. Ready to make some very messy cookies? Sophie took her hand without hesitation, which should have made Elena happy, but instead made her chest tight. Her daughter was getting attached to these people. They both were. And when it all fell apart, because it would, things always did, Sophie would be the one who got hurt. Second thoughts? Catherine's voice was gentle. About 50 of them. Good. That means you care. Catherine squeezed her shoulder. Go knock their socks off. We'll be here when you get back. The car was a town car, black and gleaming, driven by a professional who held the door and called her ma'am. Elena sank into leather seats that probably cost more than her last month's rent and tried not to throw up from nerves. Reed Technologies was housed in a glass tower in the Loop, all modern architecture and corporate polish. Elena had looked it up last night. 53 floors, 1,500 employees, annual revenue in the billions. Mason's company. Mason, who'd bought her daughter pancakes and somehow decided that made her his responsibility. Security in the lobby checked her ID, gave her a visitor badge, directed her to the 32nd floor. The elevator was glass too, offering views of Chicago that made Elena's stomach lurch. She focused on the floor numbers instead, counting down the seconds until she had to perform. The 32nd floor was corporate hospitality, according to the directory. Sleek reception area, comfortable seating, abstract art that probably cost more than Elena would make in a year. The receptionist, young, polished, perfect, smiled at her approach. Elena Hart, Mr. Chen is expecting you. Conference room B, just down the hall. Elena followed the directions, her heels clicking on polished floors, and found Liam Chen waiting outside a glass-walled conference room. He looked different in the office. Still young, but authoritative in a way that suggested people listened when he talked. Miss Hart, good to see you again. He shook her hand, gestured to the conference room. We have a panel interview set up. Don't let that intimidate you. It's standard procedure for management positions. Panel interview. Elena's stomach dropped. How many people? 3. Myself, Jennifer Torres from HR, and Marcus Webb from corporate hospitality. He'd be your direct supervisor if you're hired. Liam must have seen something in her face because his expression softened. You'll be fine. Just be honest and be yourself. Be herself. Right. The herself who'd been homeless a week ago. That would definitely impress them. But she followed Liam into the conference room anyway, because what else was she going to do? She'd come this far. Jennifer Torres was a black woman in her 40s with kind eyes and a firm handshake. Marcus Webb, no relation to her late husband, but the name still hit like a punch, was white, late 50s, with the weathered look of someone who'd worked his way up from the bottom. They both smiled, offered coffee, gestured to a seat at the head of the table. Elena sat, adjusted her blazer, and reminded herself to breathe. Thank you for coming in, Jennifer said. We've reviewed your resume and references, and I have to say your background in hospitality management is impressive. 4 years at the Drake Hotel, 2 years coordinating events for the Hilton Chicago. Those are competitive positions. Thank you. I enjoyed the work. But you left the field 3 years ago. Marcus leaned forward slightly. Can you tell us why? Here it was. The gap in her resume. The part where she explained how her life fell apart. Elena had practiced this answer in the mirror last night, had tried to find words that didn't sound like excuses. My husband was diagnosed with cancer, she said, keeping her voice steady. I took a leave of absence to care for him during treatment. He passed away 2 years ago, and I spent the following year focusing on my daughter and trying to figure out our next steps. The lie came easier than she expected. Marcus hadn't died of cancer. It had been sudden, violent, a fall that broke everything. But people understood cancer. Cancer didn't make them ask uncomfortable questions about why she hadn't had savings or family to fall back on. "I'm very sorry for your loss," Jennifer said softly. "That must have been incredibly difficult." "It was. But I'm ready to return to work now. I need to provide stability for my daughter, and I know I can do this job well." Marcus made a note on his tablet. "The position we're discussing is corporate hospitality coordinator. You'd be managing internal events, board meetings, client visits, company gatherings, as well as coordinating travel and accommodations for executives and VIP guests. It requires flexibility, discretion, and the ability to handle high-pressure situations." "Does that align with your experience?" "Yes. At the Drake, I coordinated events for groups ranging from 20 to 200 people. I managed vendor relationships, handled last-minute changes, worked with difficult clients. I'm comfortable with pressure." "Good." Marcus smiled slightly. "Because we specialize in difficult around here. Mr. Reed has particular standards." Elena met his eyes. "I've met Mr. Reed. I think I can handle his standards." Liam coughed, which might have been covering a laugh. Marcus raised an eyebrow. "You know Mason personally?" "We met recently. He's been very kind to my family." "That sounds like Mason." Jennifer's smile was genuine. "He has a habit of collecting strays. I mean that affectionately. I was one of them 10 years ago. Single mother, no degree, working 3 jobs. He hired me as an administrative assistant and paid for me to finish my bachelor's." The comment settled something in Elena's chest. She wasn't the first person Mason had helped. This was a pattern, not a pity project. The interview continued for another 30 minutes. They asked about her experience with budget management, crisis response, vendor negotiations. Elena answered as honestly as she could, drawing on skills she'd thought were lost to her previous life. It felt good, using her brain this way again, remembering that she was more than just a mother struggling to survive. When they finally stood, shook hands, and thanked her for coming in, Elena felt cautiously optimistic. Not confident, she'd learned not to count on anything, but hopeful in a way she hadn't been in months. "We'll be in touch by the end of the week," Jennifer said. "But between you and me, I think you'd be a good fit here." Liam walked her back to the elevator. "That went well." "You think so?" "I know so. Jennifer doesn't say things she doesn't mean, and Marcus only smiles at people he likes." Liam hit the button for the lobby. "For what it's worth, I think you're exactly what this team needs. Someone who knows what it's like to fight for things, who doesn't take stability for granted." Elena blinked hard against the sudden sting in her eyes. "Thank you." "Don't thank me yet. If you get the job, I'll be working you to the bone." But his smile took the edge off the words. The elevator doors opened in the lobby, and Elena was about to step out when she saw Mason crossing the marble floor. He spotted her at the same moment, changed direction. "Elena, how'd it go?" "I think it went okay. I don't know. I'm terrible at reading these things." "Marcus is impossible to read. Jennifer's the one to watch. If she liked you, you're in." Mason glanced at Liam. "Did she like her?" "I'm not supposed to say."